Welcome to the Lore Vault, a quiet place where stories drift softly through the night. Tonight, we open a record on Commander Dante, the golden angel of the Blood Angels, a legend who has carried duty for 15 centuries. We follow the child he once was on Bal Secundus, the weight of command that shaped him, and the moment he begged Sanguinius for release, only to be refused. And hidden within these memories lies a single relic. A letter Dante wrote during the devastation of Baal, a letter he never sent. This is Sleepy Hollow, where lore becomes a lullaby. Let me take you a little deeper tonight, deeper than the surface of armor, deeper than the history recorded in Imperial archives, deeper into the silence that grows inside a soul when it has lived far too long. You see, when people speak of Commander Dante, they often picture a legend, golden armor shining beneath the dying suns of the Imperium, wings of sculpted metal framing a warrior who seems untouched by time. They imagine victory, leadership, resilience, but legends are loud. The truth is quiet, and the quiet is where I spend most of my nights, turning through old records, listening to the things that are never said out loud, the things whispered between the lines. Tonight I want to bring you with me into that quiet. I want you to walk with me through the parts of Dante that do not appear in celebratory hymns or battle honors, the parts that only appear when the galaxy sleeps, and a man, no matter how legendary, finds himself alone with the weight of centuries pressing down upon his chest. Let us begin with the wound that does not bleed, the wound that has no scar. Survivor sets guilt. It is an almost gentle phrase, isn't it? Soft, abstract, harmless at first glance. But for Dante, it is a trench carved deep into the bedrock of his being. To live for more than 1,500 years is to bear witness, over and over, to the moment when someone else falls, so that you may continue standing. Brothers, captains, heroes, entire companies of warriors who lived and died while he remained. Imagine that accumulation. Imagine the weight of remembering faces that no longer return your gaze. Whole generations of Astartes rose, fought, and vanished, and he outlived them all. I sometimes think that, for Dante, every new dawn must feel like an accusation, a quiet whisper. Why you? Why still you? He might not answer it aloud. He's far too disciplined, far too controlled. But the question follows him like a shadow. To everyone else, he is a constant, but constancy can be its own kind of suffering. The universe keeps moving around him, erasing, replacing, renewing, and Dante remains. A monument that cannot fall, even when every part of him aches to rest. And then there is time. Not the time you and I feel, not the days and nights that pass at a human pace. For someone like Dante, time becomes something different. It stops being a line. It becomes a circle, a loop. Every war begins to resemble another war fought centuries earlier. Every loss echoes an older grief. Every triumph feels like a repetition of a triumph he can no longer emotionally access. When you live long enough in that kind of loop, something inside you begins to fade. Not courage, not duty, but novelty, wonder, the small human spark that makes life feel new. For Dante, time is a weight, heavy, unchanging, endlessly pressing down, a kind of spiritual erosion, and yet, he keeps walking beneath it, even as each century steals a little more color from the world. But the cruelest twist of his story came not from age, but from renewal. When Dante crossed the Rubicon Primaris, many believed it was a miracle, a resurrection, a return to power and vitality. And yes, his body was reborn, stronger, faster, purer than ever before. Yet, inside that newly forged vessel, nothing changed. Imagine the sensation of waking in a body that no longer matches the person you became through centuries of battle and grief. Imagine being forced back into the strength of youth when your soul has already made peace with the idea of rest, perhaps even welcomed it. Dante didn't yet want the gift. He accepted it because the Imperium demanded it of him. But to him, it must have felt like a kind of imprisonment. A gilded cage. A body too vibrant for the exhausted spirit living inside it. And then there is the battle he fights in absolute silence, the one carried in every cell of his blood. The red thirst and black rage, the curses of the sanguineous bloodline. Many blood angels release their fury in controlled bursts, letting the storm burn through them in the heat of battle. But Dante, no, that is not his way. He locks those storms behind walls built from sheer will, forcing them down, pressing them into darkness. Every day, every hour, he must hold back the instinct to tear, to feed, to fall into the madness of the Primarch's death. It would be so easy, so terribly easy, to surrender to it. But he never does. He refuses. He endures. Silent, stoic, alone. To command others, he must command himself first. To lead a chapter cursed by grief, he must bury his own deeper than theirs. Sometimes, when I think about Dante, I don't picture him in battle. I picture him standing still, breathing, holding himself together, keeping the beast inside his blood in chains for just one more day, one more hour, one more breath. And maybe that is why his story begins here, in this quiet place of the mind, where ancient guilt meets unbearable longevity, where youth becomes a burden rather than a blessing, and where rage is held back with the strength of a dying star. I bring you through these shadows, not to provoke fear or awe, but to prepare you, because once you understand the landscape of his inner world, the loneliness carved by centuries, the fatigue that no sleep can cure, you will be ready for what waits in the next chapter of his tale. The part where the mask comes on, and where the man beneath disappears. The whispering of Marcus Hale's name did not appear on the audio feed by accident. It repeated twice, each time with growing clarity, as if the chamber were adjusting its cadence to sharpen the syllables. Hale froze. The tactical team exchanged quick glances, but no one spoke. The weight of the sound was enough. A sensor glitch couldn't have replicated the inflection, the subtle inhale before the consonants, or the quiet decay of the vowel at the end. This was a voice shaped by a mouth, a throat, a set of lungs. Yet there was no one in the room to speak it. Hale ordered the feed replayed. The whisper returned, identical in every measurement except one. The second playback contained a faint echo, almost too soft to detect. When amplified, the echo carried an entirely different tone beneath the chant, a second voice murmuring right under the primary one. It was distorted, like a speaker submerged in water, but undeniably present. A counterpoint, a response. The team's biometric monitors spiked simultaneously, and one of the junior agents asked the question they were all thinking. If the chamber was empty, where were the voices coming from? No one had an answer. Hale instructed the team to hold position while he approached the blast door. His steps echoed in the narrow hallway, the sound bouncing unnaturally, as though the building itself was stretching the reverberations into longer threads. The closer he moved toward the chamber, the more the cold strengthened, creeping up from the concrete floor through the soles of his boots. When he reached the access panel and placed his hand over the biometric reader, the metal felt like frostbitten bone. The blast door shuddered once before unlocking. As the hydraulics engaged, the corridor darkened slightly, as though some unseen shadow passed overhead. The door opened slowly, revealing the ritual chamber beyond it, a circular, stone-lined room whose geometry was never entirely Euclidean, even when dormant. The pulsing sigil at the center bathed the space in a dull amber glow, and for a split second, Hale thought he saw movement across its surface, like reflections rippling on water. He stepped inside. Immediately, the chanting ceased. The air stilled, heavy with suspended breath. The glow dimmed to a faint simmer, enough to illuminate only the first few lines of carvings on the floor. Hale approached the sigil carefully, his flashlight trembling despite the stillness of his hands. The device flickered with interference the closer he got, static crawling across the beam, as if the chamber rejected artificial light. When the beam finally steadied, the carvings beneath it revealed something the archival photos never captured: fresh grooves. The sigil had changed. Its lines had subtly reorganized themselves, curling inward, forming new arcs that reacted like muscle contractions. The symmetry was gone, replaced by a pattern that suggested the chamber was preparing to focus its energy. Hale leaned down, examining the deepest mark. It had been etched recently, within minutes, not years. Without warning, the chanting surged back, louder and sharper. The stone under Hale's feet vibrated violently, sending fine dust drifting from the ceiling. The tactical team rushed to the doorway, weapons raised, but an unseen force halted them abruptly. One agent staggered backward as if shoved by a massive hand. Another's flashlight swung upward as a burst of static flooded their radios. From the center of the chamber, the sigil ignited with blinding light. The carvings pulsed in rhythmic waves, and the whispering voice returned, not as a whisper this time, but as a layered chorus, overlapping itself in impossible ways. It spoke Hale's name again, but now it was followed by others. Names of people who had never entered the site. Names of the original priests who died during the last ritual. Names of researchers who had closed the project, redacted it, buried it. Hale felt a tremor in his chest as the chamber recited the final, most chilling one. "You forgot us." A tremor swept through the floor. The sigil's glowing lines peeled upward, like molten threads, rising into the air as if pulled by invisible fingers. The lines twisted together, forming a suspended structure that resembled a spine, then a ribcage, then something more abstract, an anatomical design that did not align with human physiology. The chamber hummed louder, as though straining to complete a shape beyond comprehension. The tactical team attempted to pull Hale back, but the chamber's gravitational pull intensified. Objects on the ground rolled toward the center, clattering across the stone. Hale felt the pressure around his body shift, tugging him toward the glowing structure. He braced against the floor, but found no stability. The stone had softened beneath his boots, the carvings shifting like tendons under skin. Then the chamber spoke again, not through whispers, not through chanting, but through a single, unified resonance that filled the air and the walls and Hale Sepp's bones simultaneously. The ritual continues. The suspended structure snapped downward, embedding itself into the floor with a deafening crack that shook the entire facility. Lights up the corridor exploded in bursts. Dust rained from the ceiling. The tactical team pulled backward as the blast door slammed shut, locking Hale inside the chamber alone. For a brief moment, the sigil's glow intensified to a near whiteout, and then the sensors recorded the last thing they ever captured inside the chamber: Hale's figure, standing upright in the center, before dissolving into a blur of shifting light, absorbed, consumed, or transformed by the ritual that had learned to finish itself. Let's keep going, just a little deeper. The night is still with us, and there is one last chamber in Dante's story we have not yet stepped into. The place where everything, his guilt, his age, his mask, his burdens, converges into a single truth he has spent centuries carrying alone. We have spoken of the man beneath the armor. We have spoken of the fire within the blood. Now, let us speak of destiny. There are scrolls, old and fragile, written by the hand of Sanguinius himself, records so ancient that even the archivists treat them with fear. They speak of a golden warrior, one who stands at the Emperor's side in the final darkness, a figure of radiant armor and unbroken will, a figure who endures long past all reason, a figure who survives every wound, every age, every grief, because the galaxy refuses to let him fall before the appointed hour. Some think it a metaphor, some dismiss it as myth, but Dante believes it. And belief, for someone like him, is not a gentle thing. It is a chain. Imagine living 1500 years under the suspicion that your life is not your own, that every miraculous survival, every battle where death seems certain but passed you by, was not heroism, but inevitability, that you are being held upright by the slow, invisible hands of prophecy. It must feel like being trapped in a body of gold that refuses to break. I often picture him alone in the Strategium after the war councils have ended. Everyone leaves, the doors seal, the lights dim, and for one moment, one heartbeat, Dante lets his shoulders fall. He breathes like a man carrying the weight of a future only he fears. Because if the prophecy is true, he is not allowed to rest. Not yet, maybe not ever. Prophecy is a cruel master. It denies him even the dignity of an ending. But the galaxy is crueler still. Because when the great rift tore open, rending reality itself, splitting the Imperium into two, the side swallowed by darkness became something worse than isolated. It became blind. The Astronomicon vanished from half the galaxy. Worlds drifted. Fleets became lost. Civilizations whispered prayers into empty night, not knowing if anyone still lived to hear them. And in that endless dark, one light remained. Dante, not the man, the symbol, the presence, the steady, unwavering point of certainty in a region where hope had evaporated. That is why he is called the Lighthouse of Imperium Nihilus, not because of his victories, though they are many, not because of his title, though it is great, but because in the deepest void ever to engulf humanity, Dante shines. A solitary star where no other star survives. He guides fleets through warp storms that would devour lesser souls. He rallies worlds that have forgotten daylight. He stands as a reminder that the Imperium has not yet abandoned its lost children. And he does it alone. Imagine that kind of solitude, a loneliness not of distance, but of magnitude. To be the brightest light in the void is also to be the most exposed, the one the darkness hungers for, the one the galaxy leans upon, the one who cannot falter, because if he does, the last flame will flicker out. It is in this image that Dante's truth becomes clear. He is not a living being. He is a beacon, a point of orientation in a universe that has forgotten direction, a glowing line of defiance across the heart of oblivion. And sometimes, when I think of him standing before that impossible wall of night, I picture him not as a golden angel or an immortal commander, but as a candle, a small flame, a fragile flame, a humble human flame, not blazing, not roaring, simply refusing to go out. This is the golden candle, the final symbol of Dante's existence. The idea that true strength is not found in overwhelming power, but in persistence, in the quiet refusal to surrender, in the gentle, steady warmth that remains even when everything around it has grown cold. There is a tenderness in this metaphor, something deeply human, something that feels closer to who Dante is behind the mask, behind the armor, behind the centuries. A candle burns because it must, because that is its nature, because that is its purpose, but a candle also burns because someone, somewhere, needs its light. Dante is that light, and though the galaxy will never acknowledge the softness of it, the vulnerability of it, the quiet bravery of simply continuing, you and I can. Here, in this late hour, in this quiet space between breaths, in this moment where the noise of the universe grows distant enough for us to hear the truth. He is tired. He is burdened. He is weary beyond measure. And yet, he endures. Not for glory, not for prophecy, not even for duty alone, but because he knows that somewhere, in the dark, there are billions who still depend on the faint glow he refuses to let die. Perhaps that is the most beautiful tragedy of all. A warrior who longs for rest more than victory, a soul denied the peace of death, a man hidden behind a golden face, and still, he shines. So as we reach the end of this chapter, allow yourself a moment to picture him, not in the fury of battle, not upon a throne, not beneath the weight of prophecy, but alone, standing beneath a starless sky, holding back the night with nothing more than a single, unwavering flame. And for reasons even he cannot explain, it is enough. To whoever finds this letter, if anyone ever does, I write these words in the quiet hours, when even the fortress monastery sleeps, and the stars outside Baal seem to dim in sympathy. I do not know why my hand finally yields to ink tonight, after so many centuries of silence. Perhaps it is fatigue, perhaps it is memory, or perhaps, at last, I have run out of places within myself to hide. If this letter reaches another sep's eyes, then I ask only one mercy. Do not read it as a declaration. Read it as a moment of weakness. A single breath pulled from a life spent holding far too many in. I have carried burdens for so long that I sometimes forget they have weight. Duty is a habit. Pain becomes a companion. Even silence grows familiar after 15 centuries. But tonight, the silence feels heavy in a way that demands to be shaped into words before it crushes me from within. So I write. I must begin with something simple, though even simplicity feels extravagant now. I am tired. Not tired in the way a mortal man is tired after labor, or in the way a warrior is tired after battle. Those kinds of fatigue are honest. They end. They can be slept away. My tiredness is something else. A weariness woven so deeply into my bones that even the new flesh of the Primaris form could not purge it. A weariness that reaches beyond the body and burrows into the spirit. When I close my eyes, I see the faces of those I have outlived. They come in crowds, unending, rising behind my eyelids like waves cresting upon the shore of my memory. Some I remember with painful clarity, others are only impressions, shadows of brothers whose names were lost to war before I ever thought to write them down. To survive so long is not to triumph, it is to accumulate ghosts. I have led armies, saved worlds, been hailed as a hero more times than I care to recall. Yet none of these honors feel real when set beside the simple truth that I did not die when they did. I often ask myself, why? The answer never arrives. Some say it is fate, some say destiny, some whisper of prophecy. But to me, it has always felt like a question. Why am I still here? And if I am honest, this question haunts me more than any battlefield. There was a time long before the Rubicon Primaris, long before the rift split the galaxy, when I believed I might soon earn my rest. My body had begun to fail. My armor felt heavier each year. My heart, well, my heart had grown quieter, worn thin by centuries of grief. I thought the end approached. Peace, release, the long sleep that waits for all warriors in the end. But instead, I was dragged back into life. Reforged, renewed, reborn. They call it salvation. Forgive me, but some nights it feels like theft. This new body is strong, stronger than any vessel I ever had before. Yet inside it, I remain unchanged. The same old spirit sits within this tower of reborn muscle, like an old man trapped in a cathedral he did not ask to enter. There is an ache in that contradiction that no one around me seems to notice. They see only the gold, only the legend, only the figure who refuses to fall. But I know the truth, and I know how distant I am from the man they believe me to be. I have worn the death mask of Sanguinius for so long that I fear it has become my true face. The angelic fury carved into its surface is the only expression the galaxy is allowed to see, while the real face beneath it, lined, tired, deeply human, is kept hidden like a shameful secret. When the mask settles over me, there is a strange stillness, a quiet, as though the man named Dante is asked to step aside, to make room for something else, something the Imperium needs more than it needs me. Perhaps that is why I write this, because the mask never speaks, and I no longer trust my own voice to reach anyone without it. Words feel foreign on my tongue now, confession feels dangerous, and yet withholding this truth feels like a small betrayal to myself, if to no one else. There is one more truth I hesitate to put to paper, but I must. I am afraid. Not of death. That fear left me centuries ago. No, I am afraid of never dying. Afraid that the prophecy carved into the scrolls of Sanguinius binds me to a future I do not choose. Afraid that every battle I survive does not prove my strength, but my imprisonment. Afraid that I have become a symbol the galaxy will not allow to rest even when the fire inside me dims to embers. They say a golden warrior will stand beside the Emperor in the final darkness. They say he will not fall until his appointed moment. And I fear that I am the one the prophecy speaks of. It is a noble fate, yes, perhaps the highest possible honor. But honor is a poor salve for longing. And what I long for is simple. Not glory, not victory. Just a moment, one moment, where the weight slips from my shoulders and does not return. Sleep, true sleep, not the brief stillness my body allows, but the deep, consuming peace that ends all burdens. The kind of sleep a warrior earns at last. I do not know if that peace will ever be given to me, but tonight at least, I can admit that I desire it. If you find this letter, then you will know that even the greatest of the Emperor's servants can grow weary. Even the brightest light quivers. Even gold can crack beneath the pressure of ages. I do not seek pity, only understanding. For now, I must put down my pen. The dawn approaches, and with it, another day where I must wear the mask once more. But for these few pages, at least I have spoken with my own voice. And that is enough. Dante. If you are still reading, then allow me to go further into the places I have never shown, not even to the sanguinary priests, who know my biology better than I know myself. I speak now not of duty, nor prophecy, nor the weight of command. Those are burdens I can name, burdens I can shape with memory and logic. What follows are the truths I have kept buried beneath all of that. The first is simple, and yet its simplicity shames me. I have forgotten what it feels like to be whole. I do not mean physically. The Primaris transformation gave me a body more complete than any I have ever known. I mean something deeper, something more essential. I have forgotten what it feels like to look at myself and see only one thing, not a commander, not a symbol, not a relic of a bygone age, but a man. There was a time, long ago, when I believed I could still be that, a single, coherent self. But centuries do not merely pass. They erode, they carve fractures through the soul, just as wind carves gullies through unyielding stone. At first, the fractures are thin, hairline cracks, that only appear when mirrored against the smallest quiet moments, but over time, they widen, they deepen, they become valleys. I have become a collection of fragments, a mosaic of things others needed me to be. The warrior, the savior, the symbol, the leader, the angel, the judge, the last survivor, but rarely, if ever, the man named Dante. Sometimes I fear that if someone asked me who I truly am, and stripped away every title, every mask, every burden, I would have no answer left to give. That is the hidden truth I have carried the longest. I do not know myself anymore, and the shame of admitting that is almost enough to still my hand even now. There is another truth buried alongside it, one I despise myself for acknowledging. Throughout my life, I have taught countless warriors that strength comes from unity, heart, mind, spirit, aligned toward a singular purpose. But I have not known unity within myself for centuries. Instead, what I have known is division. One part of me still yearns for the battlefield, for the clarity it once provided, the purpose, the rhythm, the way a sword's edge could silence every stray thought. I remember the early years, when combat felt like truth, when every strike felt like an affirmation of existence. But another part of me, a larger part, I think fears that battlefield now. Not because I fear defeat, but because I fear victory. The more I survive, the further I drift from the brothers who once stood beside me. There comes a point where survival ceases to be triumph and becomes isolation. I reached that point long ago. There is also the matter of time. Time is my greatest enemy and my most constant companion. It does not strike like a blade or roar like a daemon. Instead, it wears, it softens, it dulls, and then it sharpens everything you wish would fade. I have forgotten entire wars, entire campaigns, entire worlds, not because they were unimportant, but because my mind can no longer hold them all. They slip through me like sand, and yet, the losses, the faces, the voices, the final moments of those I once commanded, those remain sharp, those remain carved into the marrow of my being. It is a cruel imbalance. Time steals what I wish to keep and preserves what I wish to forget. And then there is guilt, a guilt so old that I sometimes forget how young I was when it first rooted itself inside me. I survived when others fell. I was chosen when others deserved it more. I was lifted up while others were buried. Every honor I have received in life has been shadowed by the question, why me when so many better souls were taken? There is no answer, and yet the question remains. You may think this is grief or melancholy, but it is not. It is something deeper, a structural flaw in the foundation of who I am, one that has grown with each passing century. I have led the Blood Angels longer than many civilizations survive, and with each generation, I bury sons I never truly had the chance to know. I watch their names fade from records, their deeds reduced to a line of text, their lives becoming echoes. I carry their echoes. I carry too many. This is a truth I could speak to no one, because a commander is expected to honor the dead without being consumed by them. But I am consumed, quietly, politely, invisibly. The galaxy sees only the gold. They do not see the ghosts clinging to its surface like dust. And beneath all of this lies a truth even darker, one that has grown like a shadow stretching across my existence. Sometimes, I do not want to go on. Not in the sense of surrendering life or duty, but in the sense that I no longer wish to carry so many selves, so many memories, so many expectations. Sometimes, when I remove the armor and the mask, and I am alone, utterly alone, I ask myself what it would feel like to simply cease, to be allowed a moment, just one, where I am not needed, not summoned, not demanded by anyone. Peace. That is the word I avoid, because it feels indulgent, but it is the truth. The hidden truth. The truth I can confess only to this page. And perhaps the saddest part is this. I do not believe peace will ever come for me. Not while prophecy hangs above my head like a sword no forge can shatter. Not while the Imperium needs a beacon in the dark. not while I still draw breath, which means, in the end, that this letter, these words, is the closest I will ever come to rest. A moment stolen from centuries, a confession made in the dark, a truth whispered into the void, hoping it will not echo back too loudly. If you have read this far, then you now know what no one else does. Strength is not what keeps me standing. Purpose is not what guides me. Fate is not what preserves me. It is simply momentum. The momentum of a life too heavy to set down. This is the first truth behind the mask. The truth I could never speak while wearing it. If you have followed me this far, then perhaps you are ready for what comes next. Truths I have never dared to articulate, even in the privacy of thought. Truths that I have, for centuries, kept sealed beneath layers of discipline, ceremony, and silence. Truths that frighten me, not because they diminish me, but because of how profoundly they reveal who I really am beneath the gold. This second layer is not about what I have endured. It is about what I have become. I will begin with something I have never said aloud. I fear the man I once was would not recognize me now. There is a distance, a gulf, between the boy named Louis, who stood trembling on Baal Secundus, and the chapter master known as Dante. Not a gulf created merely by time, but by erosion of the self. The more I was called upon to lead, the more pieces of myself I surrendered. Responsibility takes, and takes, and takes, and rarely returns anything. I sometimes wonder if Louis still exists within me, or if I have long since smothered him beneath duty. There are days when I search for him, search for even the faintest memory that feels alive rather than curated, and I cannot find him. This absence terrifies me. To lose oneself is not a single moment. It is a slow unmaking, a gradual fading, a hollowing out that continues until the emptiness becomes familiar, and the scraps of identity left behind feel like artifacts from someone else's life. This is the first truth no one knows. I am not whole, and I have not been whole in a very long time. The second truth is more difficult to confess, but necessary. There are moments, fleeting, quiet, dangerous moments, when I resent the very people I have sworn to protect. Not because they are unworthy, for humanity is flawed, but precious. Not because they are ignorant, though many cannot fathom the scale of what we endure, but because I envy them. I envy their impermanence, their ability to live lives defined by beginnings and endings, their freedom to be afraid without shame, their luxury of experiencing loss without needing to bury it beneath command. I envy the simplicity of a mortal sip's grief. It hurts them deeply, yes, but it eventually softens. It does not calcify into an immortal wound that grows heavier with each century. Mortals are allowed to move on. I am not. This envy, though quiet and carefully controlled, sometimes manifests as a kind of cold distance, a space between myself and those I protect, a space I fear will only widen as time goes on. It is a shameful truth, but there is truth in shame. I am not proud of it, but neither can I deny it. The third truth is one I have never shared with the sanguinary priests, though they would ask if they knew how to. It concerns the red thirst and black rage, our twin curses. Everyone assumes I have mastered them through discipline alone. They assume that because I do not succumb as others do, I must be stronger, more resolute, more resistant. But the truth is far stranger. There are times when I feel the madness rising, when the visions of Sanguinius's death press into my skull like a blade, and in those moments, it is not discipline that saves me. It is emptiness, a hollowness so vast that the rage has nowhere to anchor itself, a quiet so deep that the echoes of the Primarch's final moments cannot find purchase. Without realizing it, I have become disengaged from myself, a spectator within my own mind. Detached. This detachment has saved me from losing control. but it has also stolen from me the ability to feel what my brothers feel, to experience the full glory of righteous fury, to sense the fire that once made the blood angels who we are. In extinguishing the madness, I have dimmed the flame, and that is the truth I have never admitted. I am no longer what my chapter is, not truly. I stand with them, but I do not burn as they do. The fourth truth lies in the mask, though not in the way most imagine. People believe the death mask conceals my weakness. They believe it hides the tired lines of my face, the age, the sorrow. But the mask does something far more insidious. It hides my desire to stop pretending. When the mask is on, I am not allowed to be weary. When the mask is on, I am not allowed to falter. When the mask is on, I must be the embodiment of Sanguinius's vengeance and grace. But beneath the mask, there are moments, quiet ones, when I feel an overwhelming urge to let it slip from my hands and shatter on the ground. To let the world see the truth of me, a man stretched thin across centuries, held together not by certainty, but by obligation. I never do it. Of course I never do it. Duty forbids it. Identity forbids it. History forbids it. But the urge remains, and it grows stronger with every passing year. The fifth truth, and perhaps the darkest, is this. Sometimes I fear I continue not because I choose to, but because I do not remember how to stop. Momentum has become a substitute for purpose. Motion has become a substitute for hope. I rise because I have always risen. I lead because I have always led. I fight because I have always fought. But when I search for the part of me that wants these things, I find silence. Not resistance, not despair, just silence. A quiet so complete that it frightens me more than rage ever could. This is the truth no one has ever known. I do not know whether I continue out of duty or out of habit, and I cannot tell which possibility terrifies me more. There is one final truth in this layer, and then I will stop. Not because I have exhausted confession, but because I fear going further too quickly. The truth is this. I am afraid that if the galaxy ever stopped needing me, if the mask ever slipped, if the gold ever dulled, if the prophecy proved false, I would have nothing left to hold myself together. Duty is the rope that keeps me upright. But ropes fray, even golden ones. You now know the second layer, the one no eyes have ever seen. If you truly wish to know me, then the final layer remains. But once you read it, there is no turning back. What lies in layer 3 is the truth I fear even more than my own death. If you have reached this final layer, then I must trust that you will understand what I am about to confess. Not excuse it, not admire it, simply understand it, because this is the part I have never dared to speak, not to my chaplains, not to my apothecaries, not to the Emperor himself in prayer. These are the thoughts that surface only when the armor is set aside, when the corridors fall silent, when the candles burn low, and the night presses its weight against my chest like a shroud. This is the truth behind everything. The truth beneath the gold. The truth I have spent centuries trying to deny. I will begin with the smallest and simplest of these truths. I do not believe I am the man the Imperium thinks I am. I know this sounds trivial. Self-effacing modesty from a commander grown too old to accept praise. But it is not modesty. It is clarity. An awareness sharpened by centuries of being mistaken for something greater, something purer, something more divine than any mortal, even an Astartes, could ever be. People look at me and see Sanguinius. They see the echo of a legend, not the reality of the man beneath it. They see the gold and forget the weight. I have tried to live up to their expectations. Emperor knows I have tried. But the truth is that no one can bear the weight of another's myth forever, not even I. This is not humility. It is exhaustion. The second truth is far darker, and I struggle to put it to paper. There are nights, rare, mercifully rare, when I feel something stir within me. Not the red thirst, not the black rage, something quieter, hidden beneath both. A thought so soft, I once mistook it for grief. It is this: I wish the prophecy had chosen someone else. Not because I fear the destiny it promises, but because I fear the cost of fulfilling it. Each century that passes takes something from me, something that does not grow back, even with a reforged body. And yet every century also tightens the noose of destiny around my throat. If I am the golden warrior foretold, then my life is no longer my own. My death will not be mine either. I exist only to fulfill an ending written long before I was born. Imagine believing, even for a moment, that you are not living your life, but waiting for it to be spent by someone else's design. For centuries, I resisted the thought. But resistance has worn thin, and beneath that thin line of will lies the truth. I am afraid that my survival is not triumph. It is imprisonment. The third truth is the one I have buried deepest. The one I could never allow to surface, not even in private. I have always been told that I endure because I am strong, because duty fortifies me, because resolve defines me. But the truth is more fragile. I endure because I do not know how to stop. Momentum carries me forward like a river carries a leaf. Every decision I make, every order I give, every step I take, feels predetermined by the centuries that came before. I act not because I choose to, but because choosing otherwise feels unthinkable. When people ask how I continue, I tell them the truth they want to hear. Duty, honor, faith. But the truth beneath that truth, the truth I have never allowed myself to say, is that I continue simply because I am afraid of what lies on the other side of stopping. What happens if the symbol falters? What happens if the beacon dims? What happens if the galaxy sees the man instead of the mask? What happens if I allow myself to collapse? The fourth truth is the one that terrifies me most, because it is not a feeling, it is a realization. A quiet, devastating clarity. I have spent my life illuminating the darkness for others, but in doing so, I have wandered deeper into darkness myself. For every world I saved, a piece of me dimmed. For every century I survived, a memory faded. For every brother I buried, another corner of my soul grew cold. What remains of me now is thin, a flicker, a flame trembling in its wick. And here is the truth I feared above all others. I do not know if I want to be saved. I know how this sounds. But understand me, not as a commander, but as a man. I have lived too long, fought too long, buried too many dreams, too many hopes, too many pieces of myself. Rest calls to me not as surrender, but as mercy. For centuries I believed I longed for death. But that was a lie. What I long for is completion. A moment where I may finally lay down the mask, the armor, the prophecy, the ghosts, and simply cease to be needed. That moment may never come, but the longing remains. If prophecy holds me upright until the final darkness, then perhaps the end will not be my punishment, but my release. Here then is the final truth, the truth beneath all others. I am not afraid of the end. I am afraid that it will never come. That is the truth I have never spoken, the truth I feared even to think. The truth I now set down on this page, because I can no longer bear its weight alone. If someone has read this letter, this confession, then I ask only one thing. Do not judge me. Do not worship me. Do not mourn me. Simply remember that behind the gold, behind the wings, behind the legend, there was a man who carried his burdens as quietly as he could. A man who tried to shine for others even as his own light dimmed. A man who feared not death, but eternity. And if fate is kind, if prophecy is true, if the galaxy allows me that final moment, then let my last act be this, to close my eyes, and let the darkness come, as gently as sleep. Dante. If you have reached this point, the end of this letter I should never have written, then I find myself wondering who you are, a scribe, a wanderer, a warrior searching through the ashes of a forgotten chapter, or perhaps no one at all, and these words lie unread beneath dust and time. But if you are reading this, then there are things I must say before I force myself to stop. For the first time in 15 centuries, I have spoken without armor, without rank, without expectation, without the mask that has become both my face and my burden. There is a strange lightness in that. Not relief, not peace. Those would be luxuries far too great for someone like me. But a lightness nonetheless. Like loosening a strap that has cut into the skin for so long, you had forgotten the pain beneath it. This letter is not a cry for help, nor a request for forgiveness, nor an attempt to unburden myself upon another. It is simply an acknowledgement, a quiet admission to the dark, that I am still human beneath the gold. Even now, as I write these last lines, I feel the old habits pulling at me, the instinct to correct myself, to erase weakness, to reshape these words into something befitting a chapter master, something stoic, unbreakable, inhuman. But I will not. For once, I will leave the truth unpolished. For once, I will not hide behind duty. For once, I will allow myself the fragile dignity of honesty. There is something I must confess before this final page ends, something that has hovered at the edge of my thoughts through every line I have laid down tonight. I do not know what will become of me, not as a warrior that is already written, not as a commander that story has been told, but as a man. I have lived too long to believe that victory brings resolution, too long to believe that service guarantees meaning, too long to believe that sacrifice shapes destiny rather than merely feeding it. The truth is, I do not know if I will meet my end as prophecy demands, standing beside the Emperor in the last darkness, or if I will fade quietly, anonymously, swallowed by the very void I have spent centuries illuminating for others. But what I do know is this: whatever my end, whatever shape the final hour takes, I no longer fear it. Fear is for beginnings, for men who believe they have something left to lose. I have lost too much, too often, across too many centuries to cling to fear. What remains in me now is not dread, but wariness. A weariness so deep it feels almost like calm, and in that calm, I find the faintest echo of acceptance. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps acceptance is the closest thing to peace a warrior like me can hope for. I wish I could tell you that I write these words with certainty, that I know what they mean, that I can claim clarity after laying bare the shadows of my mind. But I cannot. Clarity is for those who stand outside the storm. I have lived inside it too long to pretend I understand its shape. Still, there are some things, even a storm cannot wash away. I know I have loved my chapter, not with tenderness, that is a luxury denied to us, but with a devotion forged in fire and bound by blood. I know I have carried my brother's memories with me long after their bodies turned to ash. I know I have kept vigil over 1,000 worlds, because someone had to. I know I have walked through centuries of darkness, not because I was brave, but because I could not leave others to walk it alone. If there is any virtue in that, let it be remembered. If there is none, let it fade with me. All I ask of whoever reads this is that you understand I did not endure because I was unbreakable. I endured because I was already broken and still refused to fall. That is the simplest truth of me, the closest thing to meaning I can offer, the final echo I leave behind. There is little more to say now. The night is thinning. The candles that lit these pages have burned low, their wax pooling like spilled thoughts across the table. In a few hours the rites of dawn will begin, and I will once again adorn myself in gold, the armor that hides the man, the mask that silences the soul. And no one will know that somewhere, in the deepest hours of the night, the man beneath it whispered his last unguarded words onto parchment. But I will know, and perhaps that is enough. If ever my end comes, whether in fire, prophecy, or quiet, let this letter stand as the proof that I once allowed myself to be simply Dante. Not the Lord of Angels, not the Regent of Baal, not the Golden Warrior. Just Dante, a tired man with a tired heart, who carried his burdens as best he could, and hoped the galaxy might one day forgive him for not shining as brightly as legend demanded. If that day never comes, if history forgets me, if prophecy consumes me, so be it. I have walked long enough. Let the light I have carried for so long pass to steadier hands. Let the galaxy survive me, or let it not. I no longer fear the answer. For now, I close this letter, not as an ending, but as a final breath exhaled into the dark. If these words reach you, then remember them gently. The gold was never meant to blind you, only to hide how human I truly was. Dante. Let me take a breath with you now. We have walked through the deepest chambers of a man who has forgotten the sound of his own heart, and before we leave this place, we must look back carefully to understand what we have seen. For nights on end, I have studied archives, battle records, personal accounts, and fragments of memory scattered across the Imperium, like drifting stardust. But nothing reveals Commander Dante as clearly as the letter you have just heard. For once the gold has cracked, and through that fracture, a light escapes that is softer and more fragile than any legend ever allowed. Let us gather that light. Let us examine it without judgment, without reverence, simply as truth. The first thing the letter reveals is the cost of immortality, not the romantic kind sung in ancient poems, but the cold, continuous erosion of the self that comes with outliving every anchor. Dante's centuries are not triumphs of longevity. They are a catalogue of diminishing returns. Every victory he gained demanded a brother in exchange. Every lifetime renewed by prophecy robbed him of connection to the life before it. He is alive, but only in the biological sense of the word. The man he once was has been worn thin by time. In the Imperium, we are told to worship endurance, but Dante shows us the other side of endurance, the side no one sings of. Endurance as a hollowing, endurance as an obligation, endurance as a slow unraveling of identity. And yet, even hollow, he stands. This brings us to the second revelation, the death mask of Sanguinius, which the Imperium celebrates as a symbol of heroism. But listen closely to Dante's words, and a darker truth emerges. The mask is not only a face of wrath, it is a suppression device, a way for Dante to silence the parts of himself. The Imperium no longer has room for his doubts, his fears, his longing for rest. The mask does not empower him, it isolates him. It turns him into an icon, and icons do not grieve. Icons do not falter, icons do not sleep. But Dante does. He just cannot afford to show it. The third truth is perhaps the most heartbreaking. Dante no longer believes he chooses his own survival. Every moment he remains alive feels predetermined, as though the universe is preserving him for a final page in a book written long before he was born. Prophecy is meant to inspire, but for him it has become a cage. He endures not because he wants to, and not even because he must, but because he cannot imagine what it means to be allowed to stop. In his own words, I endure because I do not know how to stop. That single line unmasks the tragedy at the core of Dante's existence. He is not the unbroken. He is simply the unfinished. The fourth truth we must confront is his fear, not of death, but of eternity. Dante's greatest terror is not falling, but never falling. To fight forever is not a hero's arc. It is a punishment, and he knows it. He feels it. With every century, every campaign, every breath that stretches into the next, he senses the possibility that he will never arrive at the quiet oblivion he secretly longs for. But here is the paradox. In all his confessions, Dante never once expresses regret for saving others. Never once does he resent the galaxy for needing him. Never once does he turn bitter. He is weary, yes, exhausted beyond measure, but not cruel, not resentful, not lost to despair. Instead, he holds on to something remarkably small and remarkably human, the desire for peace. Not glory, not ascension, not redemption, simply peace. The final truth that emerges from this letter, the one that lingers like the glow of a dying star, is that Dante is not held together by strength. He is held together by responsibility. Responsibility that he fears, that he questions, that he resents, but never abandons. And that perhaps is the essence of heroism in Warhammer 40K. Not fearlessness, not perfection, not divine purpose, but the stubborn, quiet refusal to stop shining even when the light flickers. Dante believes himself a golden candle, a small flame trembling in a storm too vast to comprehend. But what he cannot see, what we, standing outside his suffering, can, is that a candle in the dark is enough to become a lighthouse. He has guided worlds, fleets, and civilizations, not because he is perfect, but because he refuses to dim. That is the beauty of Dante Spet's tragedy. That is the truth hidden beneath the gold. A truth the Imperium itself might be too afraid to acknowledge. Even a weary soul can move the stars. So as we close this analysis, let us hold this final thought gently. Behind every legend, behind every prophecy, behind every armor plate and holy mask, there is always a person, fragile, uncertain, burdened, doing the best they can, in a galaxy that rarely offers mercy. And sometimes, that is enough. And so, as this long night begins to fade, I want to leave you with a final thought, a quiet one, meant only for the hours when even the stars seem tired. We walk together through the corridors of a life far older than any world still burning in the Imperium. We listen to the hidden voice of a man who never allowed himself to speak, not as a commander, not as a symbol, but simply as the weary soul behind a golden mask. There is something profoundly human in Dante's story. Despite the centuries, despite the armor, despite the prophecy, not the human we see in fragility or weakness, but the human found in endurance, in the soft, uncelebrated act of continuing, in the small flame that refuses to die, even when the darkness presses close. Tonight you heard that flame flicker. You heard it tremble, but you also heard it still burn. Perhaps that is the lesson Dante never intended to teach, but leaves behind all the same. That strength is not the absence of fatigue, nor the refusal to break, but the decision, again and again, to keep carrying the light. It is easy to forget, in a galaxy drowned by war and shadow, that even the greatest legends carry their burdens quietly, that even the brightest warriors dream of rest, that behind every tale of glory is someone who once stood alone in the dark, whispering to themselves the courage to continue. And so, wherever you are tonight, whether you walk the rusted hull of a forgotten ship or rest in the dim corner of your own small room, let Dante Sep's story remind you of something gentle. A single light, however faint, however tired, is still a light. And sometimes, that is enough to guide the lost home. Thank you for staying with me through the darkness of this tale, for listening to a voice that has waited centuries to be heard. As you drift into your own sleep, may the night fall soft upon you. May the shadows feel quieter. May the weight you carry ease, even just a little. Until the next story, rest well. The galaxy can wait,